reproductive rights are under assault in the United States. And what's worse, the rationale put forth by the Supreme Court to justify rolling back nearly 50 years of precedent, that there's no implicit right to privacy in the Constitution, lays the groundwork for a full court press on a host of other settled cases. Deep Listens is taking action, and we need your help. Of course, we want you to learn about the elected officials in your area and vote in every single election, but we'd like you to consider contributing to the national network of abortion funds as well. The NNAB is a clearinghouse of regional abortion and reproductive health organizations across the United States. Their goal is to remove financial and logistical barriers to abortion access, centering on those looking for assistance and organizing at the intersection of racial, economic, and reproductive justice. You can contribute to the NNAB directly at abortionfunds.org/donate. You can also use their site to locate an abortion fund in your area so you can keep your money local and aid your neighbors. Thank you, and now back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Hello, good people. Welcome to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we explore role-playing video games in depth. My name is Jeff Rude, the host and the Gooma of this operation. Joining us, as usual, on the Off the Deep End episodes, we have the Barba of the show, Braden Arbitrary Water Redacted.
Am I a big swirling anemone? Do you have to use the hook shot to get the things so you can get the thing so you can hit the thing?
Also joining us, we've got the helmet head of the show, ZP. That is Chris, Zombie Pie Redacted. Hello, Chris.
Hello, hi. Hey, Jeff, just been perusing the internet as usual, and, you know, I live the safe search off all the time lifestyle. I just got to ask you one thing, Jeff, resident Dragon Quest expert. Why is there so much fan porn for the female priest from Dragon Quest III? She's in full characters. Orange spandex suits and just splaying her parts around, which good for her because, you know, she's just living her best life. But, like, there's a lot for the female priest from Dragon Quest III.
You know, long ago, Dragon Quest people strayed from the light of God, and they've just been beast people for a very long time.
They interpreted the tights of the original fan art very, 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 very rigidly, and God bless them.
You know, what a wonderful economic system.
This isn't the Lady Killer in a Bind episode.
Very good. If you couldn't tell by the arcane boss names that I ascribe to the stars of the Off the Deep End show, it's very clear, if you read that Zelda II manual there, that we are playing Zelda II, The Adventure of Link, for this episode. As you know, Zelda II, The Adventures of Link, was developed by Nintendo EAD, then known as Nintendo Research and Development.
Who's that?
4.
What's a Nintendo?
Well, we're going to talk all about it. It was also published by Nintendo for the Famicom Disk System. It was originally released on the 14th of January, 1987 in Japan, and it was subsequently released in Europe, then the United States. That's right. According to Wikipedia, the sole arbiter of truth in the 21st century, this came out in Europe first. We'll talk, I guess, very briefly about the weird circumstances of the Western release of this game. This Zelda 2 was then subsequently released onto literally every single viable Nintendo platform released after 2001 except the Nintendo DS. Like every single one of them. Like the Game Boy Advance, the 3DS, like everything. Everything after the GameCube.
Virtual console.
Yes. If you've owned a Nintendo console that was made in this millennium that is not called literally the Nintendo DS, you have a way of playing it. And as it turns out, if you got a DSi, you can actually play this game too if you're open to some crime. I'm told it's a pretty good way to play NES games, even though you lose out in some resolution stuff, which is why I haven't done that. But anyway, in the weeds. Hey, thanks for listening to the show, especially if you're hanging out live on Twitch there at Arbitrary Waters channel. If you, anywhere out there in internet land listening to this or watching it, would like to be a part of pre-show discussions on Zelda 2 and other RPGs, because this is an RPG, I guess, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is right. It is patreon.com/deeplistens. It is patreon.com/deeplistens. Subscribing to that at any dollar amount will get you access to a Discord full of actually some like really great people, and it will allow you, the subscriber, to add an RPG to our slush pile. We've got about a dozen left in there, and we will continue to pull from that for basically the rest of this calendar year, which is very exciting. We've also got, I guess, an outstanding bit to... we have some things we're going to need to pay up on that I guess we'll get into at the end of this episode. So we're just going to put that on the back burner for a moment, but don't worry, we'll address it. And hey, if you've got questions about anything we're doing here, questions about games we're playing, questions about games we haven't played, questions about games people play, the song from the Alan Parsons Project. It's a great song. It's a good record.
Considering where we're going, I think that it is time to reference Jeff's prayer concerns comment at the end of the podcast. We do need prayers.
You can send those to inquiries at deep.lol. That is inquiries at deep.lol. The vanity
Jesus,
URL.
Allah, Moses, the giant spaghetti monster. We need everything.
So, we've been playing Zelda 2.
A bad video game.
Just staking his claim right up front. I admire the moxie. So, I don't have this written down, but I guess before we begin, we may as well start here. What is our collective experience with this franchise? Like, Zelda's so... It's weird because it's like very, I guess, pedestrian, like, oh, you like video games, you like the Mario and the Zelda. It's like the third thing that non-video game people can probably sort of name or pull out of a hat. But at the same time, they're all kind of like core, very good, foundational, important games. Like, I think they kind of earn that reputation. So, I don't know. ZP, tell me about your Zelda timeline.
My first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time on the N64. I did have a Super Nintendo. I would say that that was still kind of like the handy-down go-to console when it was my sister's turn or a different family member's turn to play on the N64. We were a Nintendo household. I would say I gave Ocarina of Time and then later Majora's Mask a good stab when I was a child, but they were a little bit too complicated for me. I was all more about like Mario Party. I was all about Mario because, you just hit the A button to jump and you just go after stars. The whole simultaneously using action commands, multiple items, inventory management was just a little bit too much for me at the time when they came out. And so it wasn't until the GameCube era with Wind Waker when I actually finished my first Zelda game. And then from that point forward, I've played almost all of them. I would say in the grand scheme of things, I have always preferred the Zelda games when they are two-dimensional versus three-dimensional. I've definitely been going back as someone who, based off of your recommendations, Jeff, buying a DS. Some of those DS games are actually pretty all right. Like, Link Between Worlds is maybe one of the best Zelda games, and I think I even prefer it more than Breath of the Wild. I just feel like something about Zelda works better when it's two-dimensional versus on a 3D fully rendered world. Yeah, I've been playing most of them. There are only a couple that I've never played. I have not played the Philips CDI games, even though Braden somehow has.
I have.
And this was the first time, actually the second time that I have played Zelda 2. I played Zelda 2, but with like invincibility mods turned on. So I actually have beaten this game, but I just like ran cheat engine and just made my character invincible. And so this was the first time trying to legitimately, and put this in air quotes, of trying to beat Zelda 2. And as I said in the beginning, I think this game is bad. You should not play this game.
Braden.
Well, my experience with Zelda is pretty similar to Chris's in that I was a Nintendo child as a child of the plumber I think is what they say.
American
cult
Dream,
of the
son of a plumber. That's what the T-shirt
Yes.
says, right?
Cult of the unholy tri-prong, I think. So I started with Ocarina of Time as a kid. Didn't really beat it until I was like 11.
Yeah, I think that the 3DS port of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask was the first time I actually beat those games.
I did not beat Majora's Mask until the 3DS version. But I fucking love Wind Waker and have not touched Twilight Princess since about 2007. So I could not tell you how I feel about that. But I have always been someone who is... I am Zelda positive, let's say. The cool kids. They love the Zelda. They have said for the last 5 years that Breath of the Wild is the greatest game ever made. I think they're full of shit, but I understand them. And it's a series that I like all of these games. I don't hate Zelda 2 either. But none of them, I'd say very few of them, are like personal all-time favorites. A good Zelda game's fucking really good, but I don't know. There's something about that very formulaic, let's say.
I would say that there's like a Zelda template that they followed and only recently bucked with Breath of the Wild, and then the Breath of the Wild template became the template for Zelda.
And now all video games are Breath of the Wild. Congratulations,
and it's kind of
Nintendo.
the worst thing to happen, but it's not Nintendo's fault, but also goddamn Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, this... the Nintendo has done this before, right? I guess to reel that back a little bit, Jeff's experience with Zelda games, I'd probably touched A Link to the Past at someone's house as a child, and we were a Nintendo family as well for the most part, even though I had a Genesis instead of a Super Nintendo. But I did not play Ocarina of Time. At some point, we wound up with a GameCube and a PS2 in the home, and I didn't get around to playing Wind Waker till college, basically. My first Zelda game I played from start to finish was in grad school. I got home from seeing my family that first winter, and I went and bought a Wii because they were just fire sailing them, and I played Skyward Sword from start to finish over like 2 or 3 weeks. And,
really?
And liked it, basically, even though
That's the one I've never played. That and Spirit Tracks are the two main series Zelda games I have never touched.
Well, this explains a lot because I fucking hate Skyward Sword.
Yeah,
with a dying passion.
I mean, so as the first one of those things I played, it was like some things I was still kind of like learning, and they were somewhat novel. But two things stemmed from that. One, as I sort of dug around in more of these games and started like finishing them, I started to realize like, everything that people were saying about how just unbelievably formulaic and like Babby's first one of these this is, it's all true. Skyward Sword is like a deeply flawed product that I see the good in it, but goddamn Skyward Sword. The other prong of that was I was in a position where it's like, okay, well, I finished Skyward Sword. I could just work my way backwards through this whole series. So from that point forward, my goal was basically to beat every single Zelda game working backwards, devolving through time, Benjamin Buttoning my way through the series. And I pretty much stuck to that right up to the point where I got to Link to the Past, and I didn't finish that in time to get Breath of the Wild. Like, basically, Breath of the Wild beat me there. So then I'd play through all of Breath of the Wild. I've played through about half of Link to the Past, and now I've played through most of Zelda 2. So I should probably go finish Link to the Past because it's pretty good. Zelda 2, it's okay. But yeah, I've played pretty much all these stinking games, and yeah, boy, they sure came up with a formula around 1991 and just kind of really started stamping them out every 5 years or so. I guess to back the thing I started with there, Nintendo kind of invented a lot of... They did not necessarily invent genres, but they like refined genres really well and led to a lot of imitators.
Sure. I want to just say one thing real quick. I think that this might be in the same category as Ultima 4, where I don't like this game, but it is incredibly important, and obviously it had an impression. Like, I'm playing this game, and it's like, oh, hey, right, oh, this is where Volgar the Viking and fucking Shovel Knights came from, right? Yeah, cool, that's cool, that's cool. Like, so there are aspects of this game where as I'm playing it, I can see where other games got their inspiration from this game. It informed future, and look, it didn't kill a franchise. They learned from this. They slapped some water in their face, and they made another Zelda game that was one of the best in the entire franchise after this. So good on them.
Good on them.
Good on them.
So
they did it. But I think the takeaway we can all agree with is that us three, we are not the game journalists diehards of yore who the grown men crying at the sight of a Nintendo Zelda trailer.
Blades will bleed.
Blades will bleed. Shields will shatter. Pants will shat.
Yeah, there was a point where I might have been that person. I'm not anymore.
I can't be that person about anything anymore.
I still think that the art style of Wind Waker is the most beautiful this entire franchise has ever been, and I wish that they would just make a artistic big swing like that again. And the people who fucking did not like Wind Waker are bad people.
Yeah, they've been pretty roundly proven wrong over the years and shouldn't be given oxygen. So we're going to continue with the addressing feedback portion of the show and actually give a top-down view of what this game is before we start digging into the weeds of like the types of grammar that were used in Germany in the 7th century and how it relates to the game. Zelda II: The Adventure of Link. This is an action platformer with RPG mechanics. That is how I'm going to describe this game. It is an action platformer first. It's an RPG second. Very, very, very specifically. Want to note that. You navigate what amounts to basically an RPG overworld with semi-random encounters, punctuated with towns and dungeons. Both of these are explored via a side-on 2D platformer perspective. Towns have NPCs who are able to heal you, basically at no cost, because this game has no real fiscal economy to speak of. It does have an economy, though, and we'll talk about it. And these townspeople are also able to give you a handful of hints and quests the player must complete to access the dungeons in the game. The first 6 dungeons may be completed out of sequence, but all must be completed to unlock the final dungeon of the game. The ultimate goal is to defeat the final dungeon to obtain the Triforce of Courage, uniting it with 2 other Triforce pieces to obtain a wish that will awaken the mythical Princess Zelda from a spell-induced slumber. It's worth noting that the Zelda in this game is not the Zelda from the first game. It's also worth noting that this game basically codified the idea of the Triforce as a 3-pronged thing.
The 3 genders.
Yeah, there are 3 genders. Zelda was a non-Trinitarian world in 1986. It was in communion with the Church of Latter-day Saints in that way, along with, I think, Arianism and a bunch of other weird...
Yes, the Arian heresy,
Yeah.
and I believe Jehovah's Seventh-day Adventists?
Yes, La Luz del Mundo. There's a bunch of weird... Anyway, now that's the sort of
Hi,
stuff...
welcome to the off the theological end.
I was
You guys said you guys give me a bad time for my little bits that I don't clear with Jeff, but okay, we're bringing back the lecture series. Okay, all right, I'll take it back.
So Chris, the pizza ice cream was first established in 2nd century BC and preached that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost were 3 separate personages, as opposed to the modern Trinitarian idea that God is expressed through 3 different incarnations, but they are all one being of God.
When Arius literally bowed beneath the feet of Constantinople at the Council of Nicaea 1,600 years ago, is one of the most impactful moments in Western history. No one talks
very
about
important.
it. So far in the weeds. So to situate Zelda 2 a little bit further, there's kind of really 3 things to talk about as far as I'm concerned. Zelda 2 is an NES sequel, and it's a relatively early one insofar as the NES/Famicom library was concerned. The thing about that first wave of sequels on this platform is there were no rules. Things could be weird, right? This is maybe the example of this entire phenomenon. Nintendo pulled this off really twice in a big way, the other one being Mario 2, kind of both versions. The Japanese Mario 2, as you know, diverts from the first one in the sense that it is just way, way, way more obtuse and difficult.
It is a pillar of cruelty and just...
Put a bookmark in that, I guess.
Yeah.
And then
ours is better.
Yeah.
American Mario 2 is better than the original what God intended Mario 2.
And it's also better than Doki Doki Panic.
Yes, some ways I think I agree with that. Castlevania versus Castlevania 2, which I guess I had my timeline confused, but Castlevania 2 actually postdates this game. So there's this same
Fire Emblem Gaiden.
Gaiden is significantly different from Fire Emblem 1.
Yeah, you get your Metal Gear Solid versus your Snake's Revenge, which is it's got some real
Isn't Snake's Revenge an RPG?
I don't know. It's got
not for the purposes of us playing video games.
Even stuff like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games, like that first one is so weird, and then that second one is just a port of the arcade game, basically. And that's not even to get into the actual arcade games that got kind of weird conversions on the NES. So we're like weird game sequel things of like Punch-Out being like very different and divergent, and like Double Dragon being an RPG originally. Strange stuff. So it's part of that wave. Zelda 2 also, I think, pretty clearly establishes that Nintendo was not immune to Dragon Quest fever. So Dragon Quest was released in May of 1986, which was 3 months after that first Zelda game. I tried to poke around a little bit to see if anyone at Nintendo had definitively just been like, yeah, Dragon Quest, it kicked ass. We played a lot of it. It was great. I'll tell you this, executives at Nintendo really liked Dragon Quest because it sold a lot of fucking Famicoms. Here's a bit that I turned up kind of tangentially. The original version of this game, which came out of the Famicom Disk System, another note we're going to hit, there's a tombstone that's readable in the town of Saria. The grave in Japanese, if you translate it, reads, "Here lies Loto, the hero." Loto was the Japanese name for Erdrick in that first Dragon Quest game. This is like a thing that Square would riff off of when they released Final Fantasy in America, and they put a tombstone in a town that just said, "Here lies Link." So they're kind of riffing on each other already in this weird way. I couldn't find any specific quotes from Miyamoto about like him saying like, yeah, I sure liked the Dragon Quest and thought I would just make one of those. But there is an interview with him and Yuji Horii in 1989 where they're talking about game concepts that they've both had together. And Miyamoto pitches this amazing idea. I'm using very large air quotes here. The pitch is, quote, "You get to be a mother-in-law who bullies your son's wife," unquote, with the goal of throwing her out of the house within a certain number of months.
Uh-huh.
So that's nice. You know, it's a boy's world. And how cute is that?
And that's how he made Pikmin.
Yes, that's the pitch. As mentioned, Zelda 2 ran on a floppy disk as well, originally, as did Zelda 1. And unlike Zelda 1, the original Legend of Zelda, this never got re-released on a cartridge in Japan. Zelda 1 got a really late cartridge release on the Famicom in like 1993. And that never happened over there with Zelda 2. That remained on a floppy disk until it started getting converted to cartridges later in its life. So, also, I guess to note, this game came out less than one full calendar year after Zelda 1, which is insane. Considering all of the stuff that is crammed in this game, the idea that they, like, literally flogged themselves, I guess let's not use literally incorrectly here.
They
figuratively flogged themselves for like 11 months straight to bang this out. And it's not like they weren't working on other stuff at the same time. This was the same period that I think Mario 2 came out in this same stretch of time. Yeah, it would have. So, and then, you know, it's not like Miyamoto wasn't supervising some other projects along the way. So this is a very busy man. He was the producer on this. This was directed by Tadashi Sugiyama and Yasuhisa Yamamura. Her two guys I weren't super familiar with, but it turns out, surprised, they're a bunch of like old guard Nintendo royalty at this point. So let's see. Sugiyama, some early Famicom stuff. He directed Doki Doki Panic and Super Mario 2 when it got ported over here. Pilot Wings and F-Zero X. Yasuhisa Yamamura. He's a level design guy. All of his interviews, he's like very excited about building levels. If you've played Super Mario Maker either version of it, there's a little pigeon that kind of gives you instructions along the way. His name is Yamamura. The plot of this game was written by Takashi Tezuka, who designed Super Mario 1 and Zelda. So it's just a who's who of like guys who have worked at Nintendo for like 40 years, basically, including Miyamoto.
Yeah, I don't think any of them are going to ever retire. They're just going to, like, someone's going to walk into their office and is like, oh, shit, Miyamoto died.
Yeah, I heard that.
Was working on, like, Mario Maker 5.
Scrape him off the floor.
He was just burning the Paper Mario franchise to the ground and laughing.
Which is what it deserves.
Wow. Powerful.
He was saying, actually, vitality sensors the future.
So this game has a reputation, doesn't it? Right?
This has had a reputation since the olden times.
Yes. Like this is the weird one, right? In this franchise.
Yes.
Like people who love every single Zelda game will bust out like, yeah, the CDI ones are terrible and also Zelda 2. And it's like, this is not, Chris, I know you disagree. I don't think this is like a bad game in the sense that it is like a flawed, this is a complete idea, basically. There's things we can definitely talk about.
Yes, there are things that we can talk about. I will say this. I went into this game with an open mind in part because when we played Quest 64, which I think is still one of our top 5 games, or it's in the top 10 on our list, Quest 64, and I kept needing to remind myself, it's like, yeah, we played Quest 64 and everybody told us it's like the worst Nintendo 64 game ever made, and it turns out it's just a kid for children. And I went into this game and it's like, this game can't possibly be as bad as its reputation is. And again, I agree with what you're saying, Jeff, that it's ambitious. But
Quest 64 is ranked number 17 on our list.
Okay.
Currently.
But like in terms of this being a follow-up, it's weird, and I can only imagine if I was a kid and I thought I was buying the sequel to Zelda, how this would be a pretty big bummer. And then 2, this was fucking unplayable. Like, if I did not have save states and modern technology and guides on standby, I don't know, guys. Like, I don't know how this is even defensible as a game.
Chris, I want you to say into the microphone, I am not very good at video games. I've seen you lose supposedly unlosable battles in JRPGs. And I want you to say, these NES video games are too hard for me and my geriatric
I got further
hands.
into this game than you. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, because I was too busy juggling children and enjoying my life instead of playing a lukewarm action platformer for the Famicom.
As mentioned, this came out in the Famicom in 1987. This was supposed to come out in the United States not tremendously far into the future after that. This is one of a handful of games that was impacted more than most by a chips shortage that struck console game manufacturing in the late 1980s. This and Super Mario Bros. 2 were delayed into basically late 1988 for the United States releases of them, and that was not originally the intention. Shortages of parts screwing up the video game market. It's unprecedented, right? Who could imagine? So, a thing happened in 2013. Picture my face on a YouTube video, and it just says in red font with white drop shadow background, Miyamoto says he regrets Zelda 2? ? And my face is puzzled, and Zelda 2 box art is next to it. He did an interview, he being Shigeru Miyamoto, with Stephen Totila at Kotaku in June 2013. And they were, I don't remember what the hell they were demoing, but it was some friggin' Wii U game, I guess, in 2013. And Stephen Totila basically just dead ass asked him in context, is there any game that you don't really look back on fondly? Anything you kind of regret making or think bad of? And the translated quotes that come out of this are, I wouldn't say that I've ever made a bad game per se, but a game I think we could have done more with was Zelda II, The Adventure of Link. Stephen Totilo was like, that's interesting, and kind of pressed him on this. So I'm going to read kind of a handful of quotes that got pulled out of this, because I think this has been a little misconstrued over the years. So, in sequence here. Quote, when we're designing games, we have our plan for what we're going to design, but in our process, it evolves and grows from there. In Zelda II, The Adventure of Link, unfortunately, all we ended up creating was what we had originally planned on paper. I think specifically in the case of Zelda II, we had a challenge just in terms of what the hardware is capable of doing. So one thing, of course, is from a hardware perspective, if we had been able to have the switch between the scenes speed up, it could have been faster. We could have done more with how we use the side-scrolling versus overhead view and the interchange between the two. But because of the limitations and how quickly those scenes changed, we weren't able to do that. I'll note that the Famicom Disk System version of this game does have some load times. So that's what he's talking about there. The other thing is it would have been nice to have had a bigger enemies in the game, but the Famicom / NES hardware wasn't capable of doing that. Certainly with hardware nowadays, you can do that, and we have done that. But of course, nowadays, creating bigger enemies takes a lot of effort. End quote. So...
if they're going to do bigger enemies, could they have given Link like a non-floppy noodle length sword, please?
That really kind of is... A lot of it is the sword. It has the Ease 3 problem.
Yes.
I guess.
No, there's other parts of this game that are flawed and or just straight up
for
bad,
sure.
Jeff.
But
don't
the sword
do
sticks
your
out.
Historical revisionism.
The sword, yes, the sword is... It's like 3 pixels long. It is the same problem as Ease 3, as you said, where like Adol's sword in that game is so... There are a lot of parallels between this and Ease 3.
Honestly, there kind of are.
But one of these has a banging soundtrack.
Yeah, and that's... So, I don't have notes written for this, but I guess we should talk about that. So, the Famicom Disk System, I think, has 3 extra sound channels in it, versus just a stock Famicom, which is capable of expansion audio stuff, but blah, 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 blah. So the Famicom Disk System version of this game has some different sound than the version that was released on a cartridge in the United States and Europe. And it's kind of a nothing burger.
Yeah.
The theme, the title music is in a different key, and it's a little deeper. The instrumentation is, I guess, notably different. Part is not bad, but in exchange, several of the tracks are in fact about half as long and just loop a lot more. Yes. So they actually wound up kind of writing more music for the Western release of this game, and the sound effect differences that are present in the game are gonna be to taste. It's a lot of like very, very sort of synth wave monsters like yelling very discordantly versus kind of the noise channel on an NES going off for most of the sound effects. So I kind of count it as a push. Like, you might favor one or the other, but I don't think you're necessarily missing anything by not playing the FDS version of this game. In fact, as mentioned, when you factor in the load times and stuff, you're probably only missing like some wasted time, really. And it actually goes a little deeper than that, but we'll get into it. So, yes, if there are 2 distinguishing things about this game, as mentioned, it's this weird Metroidvania-ish, that's really, really stretching the definition of that word, RPG, action platformer mishmash thing in a franchise that is very, very much not about that, and it is just mercilessly difficult, almost from the jump. Almost never lets up, and every time you think you've kind of gotten one over, it just kind of comes up with a new way to make your life shitty. How did you guys feel about the start of this game? Like the jump off point, I guess, because I feel like it's maybe as kind as this game gets. Basically, is maybe the first half hour or so.
That was my favorite part of the game, and then I got to Death Mountain.
Yeah, That's the I think really insane thing. This game starts, the ramp is not terrible at the outset. You start to learn your way around like a little corner of a world map, which I guess, like, fun fact, Easter egg spoiler, the map from Zelda 1 is in this game. Did you know that? It's the other side of Death Mountain. It's true. See, as for that, if you look at the map of Zelda 1 and you look at the map of Zelda 2 and you look at that bottom left corner, it's meant to be a facsimile of the map of Zelda 1, as if to say, look how much bigger the world is. It's crazy. That place you were in Zelda 1, it's tiny compared to the rest of whatever this world is.
It's like when
this
you
was
go
before
to
the canon
Kanto
existed.
in
Yes.
Pokemon Gold and Silver.
Precise. Yeah.
Okay. So I think both of you are wrong. I think that the game makes a horrible first impression, and it's here when you start to see why this game doesn't work. It's immediately here when you realize that while it has RPG mechanics, that it can't really marry the Zelda format or template with RPG mechanics because, okay, well, I want to level up. I'm going to grind. So I guess I'll just let the slimes come to me and grind away at the slimes. Oh, wait, I'm losing experience points by every time I take damage. Oh, wait, some of the slimes only give me 2 experience points and the next level up is 100. So I'm not actually incentivized to grind or engage with these mechanics. All right, well, then I'll just make a beeline to the dungeon. Oh, wait, there's just stuff there that'll kill you immediately, and or there are things there that don't give any experience points. Oh, cool. Well, maybe I'll learn some spells. Maybe I'll learn some magic and invest in the magic build. You can't unlock the magic. You have to perform obtuse and obscure quest lines that are not properly signposted and require you to talk to randos and do things that feel completely disconnected to the actual template of the story. So almost immediately I feel like this game breaks and it doesn't work.
I can't really argue with that. I guess to marry both of your cases, I think the RPG stuff in this game actually makes it worse. I guess is my actual thesis statement up here. But such that it ever works at all, it works best in this first section because it hasn't started like... the wheels are still aligned relatively, right?
Where are you defining the start? Just like the first dungeon, or where you have to like find a random forest tile and find Bagu and it's not really properly marked, or you don't even know what you need to do there?
So that's like third dungeon stuff, but yeah, that shit's not great. I'm saying everything from like that first town up to that Parappa dungeon in the desert.
So,
I guess, I'm sort of contradicting myself. You can tackle these in kind of any order. The things that gate your progress in the world are basically items in these dungeons.
Yeah.
So you could plausibly go do kind of any one of these if you wanted to. Like the gates are, I said, items. The first real gates are like caves. Connecting sections of the world are basically completely dark, and they'll be illuminated by a candle in that first dungeon. So if you don't have that, you can't. It's not necessarily you can't get around to other parts of the world. It's just going to suck a lot more, and you are pretty squishy at that point in the game. So it kind of behooves you to go at least get that candle. And if you're going to do that, you may as well get through that dungeon.
Yeah, I went to the desert cave where you get the idol first on accident because, again, I feel like the dungeons and caves are like where I'm supposed to go is not communicated well enough, other than you can't go south from Raru town.
That sounds right.
Because there's a rock there that you're told you need to get a hammer, but that's not where you actually need to go. You need to get the candle.
We played Dragon Quest last December, right? I think the signposting in this game is as bad as that game's. Right.
I would even say it's worse only because there's like a weird Simon's Quest element of it makes no sense to go inside this town by using the chimney to get this spell from this dude. Or I think that also it does not help that not only does the magic system only progress based off of your exploration of towns and through the defeat of temples that lead to you going from one continent to the next, but moves that are basic to Zelda, like the upward thrust and the downward thrust, also need to be unlocked as if they're RPG mechanics, which is shitty.
Yeah.
It's shitty. And, like, that sucks. Like, the heart containers that increase your actual health bar not being connected to your actual progression of your character or through experience gain. Like, I get that it's a Zelda mechanic to have health orbs, but that sucks because I have to make the long walk to this weird random tile or forest and pick up this container, and then it's also a fucking cave, or it's got random encounters that can just kill me, and then I respawn back to North Castle and have to make the hoof it all over again.
Yeah, it's barely held together, this opening section, and then by the time you get to Death Mountain, it's kind of awful.
It turns into Ninja Gaiden, but worse.
But yeah, as alluded to, there's XP in this game. A lot of this is akin to a lot of RPGs where there's like a cost to dying, right? This game kind of does a weird thing in an RPG sense that you have a pool of lives that you can increase by literally finding 1-ups in the world, of which there are a finite amount that don't respawn, which is kind of strange. If you run out of those lives and die, you will regenerate at like the central temple in the world, the North Temple or North Castle, or whatever the hell it is, and you'll have lost all of the, I guess, uncached, let's call it, XP. I say uncached because that's the economy of this game, is your XP. You've got 3 distinct levels of things. You've got an attack score, a magic score, and an HP score, let's call them for lack of a better word. And they kind of do... It's strange how they work. The attack... It kind of quadratically scales as it levels up in a way. It's not like a linear scale. Your attack starts at basically 1 damage output, and I think at level 8 it's like 24 or something. So, it scales non-linearly. The magic score, what that's actually doing is just decreasing the cost of individual spells, but some of them bottom out at like level 5. You need to basically have a full pool of magic to be able to cast like the most powerful spell in the game, but you need to actually beat it, which is another fun little fuck you moment, I guess.
Yeah.
HP is, I guess, a little more straightforward. It just gives you more HP. But each one of those need to be leveled up individually with experience points that you are gaining. And they start fairly cheap. They start at like 50 XP to level up some of the earlier ones, but they top out around, I think the final attack level costs 8,000 experience. And as EP mentioned, there are monsters in this game that drop like 2 experience points. There's not a lot of them over at the end game place that you're going to be actually getting like your final levels and stuff, but roughly the median score of like XP enemies are dropping is 10. There's things that drop like 50, there's stuff that drops 100, but there's a lot of like kind of piddly shit that you're just having to like get through, and there's some monsters that just have none. They're just there to fuck with you. And in fact, those actually have this really amazing thing. As mentioned, a lot of RPGs you die and you sort of like you miss out on something. It costs you money, like in Dragon Quest, or you like lose experience between like your last save point. This one has things that just take experience from you in the field, which is fucking crazy. It's such a bastard thing to do. And a lot of them are your favorite enemies from like the Castlevania games, those like, goddamn sine wave heads and shit.
The Medusa heads from fucking Kid Icarus, as they're sick in the goddamn head.
Kid Icarus? Who are those people? Show me that person.
There are people who like Kid Icarus. I don't know
mad,
why.
Making someone up to get mad at. No one likes Kid Icarus.
People really like that DS game, even though it's the cringiest goddamn game ever made.
The DS games, it's whatever. They let Sakurai make his Kid Icarus game, and then they threw him back in the smash hole.
I've heard that game has some Space Harrier elements, so I'm sure it's great.
Oh, it does. It actually does. So when you die, you lose all 3 lives, which is going to happen. It's not a matter of if, unless you're one of those, expert speedrunners who can play this game frame perfectly.
I mean, even speedrunners use Death Warp.
Yeah, but you'll die, and then you'll go back to that North Castle. There are 2 continents. If you're in the middle of completing some of the mid to late dungeons on the second continent, warping back to that North Castle sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks a lot to have to, like, go back around, do the loop, crush those rocks again, and then use the raft to be in the middle of the continent. Like, I got to the point where I did, the 3 Rock Palace, the second to last dungeon in the entire game, right before you... Actually, I did get the Thunder Spell, but I was like, I don't want to do this, because I died, and it's like, I have to walk all the way back? Nah, fuck this.
Yeah. This map is big. It's not huge. Like, if you were to measure how many tiles wide it is, it's not like the largest thing in the entire universe or whatever. So, practically speaking, to walk from that North Castle to the Maze Island takes like maybe 2 minutes. It's not the end of the universe. The problem is, this is a video game, right?
Yeah.
It's not particularly engaging to do that, particularly if you stay on the roads and you're avoiding encounters and stuff. Like, it sort of breaks the sort of central maxim of like good game shit, as far as I'm concerned, which is don't be boring. It's just kind of boring to have to like do this walk back. And I think virtually every game after this in the series has learned that. Even Breath of the Wild, a game that is all about like just a monstrously expansive, thick, dense world that's like, you know, several square kilometers large or whatever, you can just warp anywhere at virtually any time. Right?
What's frustrating to me is that they do know how to warp next to a dungeon, because if you die in the final dungeon, the Great Palace, it actually does warp you at the entrance of the Great Palace rather than at the North Castle. So they could have done it.
Yeah.
They could have done that in this game, but they didn't. But it just goes to show you, and this is something that Braden said in my streams, is that this is still of that era where console video games had a lot of the arcade game design philosophy of, in order, like, we have to assume that this might be a person's only game that they get for an entire month, and so you have to stretch. You have to create these systems that are a little obtuse or difficult and require
want people to call into the Nintendo helpline or
and
buy
so
a copy
a lot of that
Famitsu.
design is still here, if not in its most potent. And as Jeff, you said on Discord, this is the most authentically NES-like, NES hard game that Nintendo probably ever made on the Nintendo.
Yeah, Kid Icarus is kind of a bastard.
Kid Icarus is very fucked.
Like, Kid Icarus might actually be worse, but like that game predates this by like months, and they're of a kindred spirit, I will tell you. So to continue on this XP bandwagon, though, so like, you know, you're fighting things that are dropping like 10, 50 experience. Sometimes they'll randomly drop little bags of experience. Sometimes there are hidden spots in the world that'll just have a sack with like 500 experience points in it. It feels very like, you know, white box D&D or whatever, where just like gold is experience or some shit. And as mentioned, like the final couple vinegar strokes of like finishing out getting all of your levels up to 8 are very XP burdensome, and it kind of sucks. But you'll notice as you get through this first dungeon a thing where you will beat that first boss, who is a horseman that you basically decapitate, and your XP pool will just fill, and it will give you a free level. And that free level will work no matter how much XP is remaining between, like, you know, if you have 5 experience points and your next thing is 1,000, it'll give you 995. If you have 5 experience points and your next level is 6,000 points away, it'll give you 5,995. It'll top you off. So as soon as you note that, a terrible calculus comes into play, where you could just play this game, this brutally hard game where literally anything you can scrape to have on your side, you should scrape up. The most efficient way to play this game is go into every dungeon, obtain the key item from that dungeon, leave, repeat this process for every single dungeon, getting all your stats up to level 6 along the way, just by attrition, basically, then re-enter each dungeon, beat the final boss, and cash in, you know, the little stone thing at the end that actually closes the dungeon and like destroys it forever, by the way. Doing that will save you about 30,000 XP worth of grinding.
Okay, Jeff. I have an alternate solution.
Yes?
You fucking cheat. The NES, so the Switch, you know how the Switch has classic NES games.
I was going to bring this up.
They have,
I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
There is a hacked ROM version of this game on Nintendo Switch Online, an official Nintendo product, where it just starts you with level 8 in all 3 stats at the start of the game and says, go for it, man.
And you know
and
what?
That might be the ideal way to play this.
That's probably a better game. Like, dead ass.
The numbers make this game worse.
Yeah. Again, being in a dungeon and being like, God, I really don't want to have to fight another Iron Knuckle or whatever, but if I get 100 more experience and get a level, I can get another level as soon as I go beat this boss. But I'm like 500 experience away from this now, so I need to like go kill a bunch of Medusa heads for like 30 minutes or leave this dungeon and go fight mobs in the world and then come back. Like, having to basically economize when you are getting levels while you're also playing one of the harder games in the entire library of the Famicom or NES is not fun. That's the poo-poo part of this for me.
Yeah. And also, even with those additional, because I did decide to like play around, and even Braden watched me find a nice spot where I was grinding, and the numbers do go up, and I did feel like, yeah, I can notice a little bit of a difference when I'm fighting these enemies or those enemies. There's still a lot, and Jeff, you can back me up here, there's still a lot of bullshit game design.
Yes.
There's enough of it here to where even when I had the numbers on in my favor, I was still dying because there's a bunch of cheap bullshit.
Yeah, for me, it's the very Castlevania. There's a lot of knockback that happens in this game.
There are times where you're jumping and you get knocked back and you fall into a pit of lava or water, and this is of the game era where if you touch water, you just automatically die.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like instant murder pits in the first handful of dungeons, but by that fourth one, they just start having like, okay, you need to get across these segments of platforms. The platforms fall out from under you, and there's these Medusa heads flying at you the entire time. And they spawn basically off screen. You know, you basically have to leap of faith your way across, and it'll just spawn 2 of those. One hits you midair, you fall, you die, you respawn at North Palace. You have to walk back and refight everything in the dungeon, like, again. It's not particularly fun at that point. Like, no. I don't find that to be great.
Yeah,
versus the version, as you said, I'm really glad you brought that up, Braden. If you get past the RPG parts of this and are just sort of playing a very, very, very strict action platformer game, I think that part of the game is all right. Like,
I disagree. Keep going.
If this was a briefer experience, like, you know, Castlevania is a game that has a lot of similar mechanics, right? But it's also a game that's got basically 6 or 7 levels in it, right? Like, it's a 45-minute long experience. This basically has like 7 Castlevanias in it. Like, or, you know, like, pick your metaphor, and it's like it's Castlevania that feels bad to play for a while and is spread out on a world map with a bunch of random encounters and crap in it. As said, all of the stuff that they took from Dragon Quest and tried to lard out, it's a very derivative game in some ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, and it's marrying things that should not have been attempted.
I think the original Legend of Zelda is a far more cohesive, like, tight video game.
Yeah.
Like, you know, a lot of Zelda 1 is wandering around, and there's a reason why that game came with a map in both Japan and the US. But this feels like an amalgam. This feels like them trying out a bunch of different ideas and not quite knowing what they want to do with them. Oh, right. I almost forgot.
Yep.
So apparently the leveling system on the Famicom Famicom Disk System version is way more fucked.
Yeah, that's my next note. Braden, please tell us about the Famicom system.
Okay, so the NES version, as we have just spent the last several minutes discussing, the numbers are bad and they make the game bad and hard. In the Famicom Disk System version, certain enemies are worth less experience, but also here's the fun part. When you save the game and you turn off your Famicom, your stat and reload your save, your stats will be reverted to the lowest of whichever of the 3 stats are there. So if you have level 1 attack, level 3 magic, level 3 health, they will all revert to level 1 when you load your save.
Yeah.
Which is fucking malicious.
It's crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, it's worth noting some of the enemies do yield more XP, and the costs for the levels are flat, and they tend to be a little lower. So there's like some trade-offs there, but overall it's fucked. Like, it's just fucked. Can't believe they do it.
The one thing that I do want to add to that, which versions do we all play? Out of curiosity,
I played on the Switch.
I played
Jeff.
I played the PlayStation Portable version.
I played the RetroArch version.
Yeah, all right.
I played the original U.S. port of the game, and boy howdy did this. The one part of this game that what I think is the best part of this game is the original English translation, because God bless this game's original English translation. Bagu is my name. I am error. Sorry, I know nothing.
One of my first Miiverse posts on the Wii U. Shout out to the Miiverse. You beautiful bastard. They shouldn't have killed you.
Shout out to the guy who liked the water.
I went and met I Am Error and posted that on the Miiverse and just wrote like, I did the thing. And like 5 people liked it, and it made me feel good. Yeah, it's an all-timer.
Bagu is my name. Show my note to River Man.
It's a lot harder to fit Roman lettering on a cartridge than it is to fit kanji.
If all else fails, use fire.
That's just true for life.
I think it would be worth saying that overall this is a better translation than Castlevania 2's.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's, for the most part, like, everything that you need to do, you're at least pretty clear what you need to go do, even if they don't tell you, like, where a thing is. Like, they will be like, we are looking for a child, we need water, etc. Castlevania's, it's just people basically just lying to you half the time.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I know nothing.
Yeah.
I am thirsty.
Shout out to the people who say, sorry, I know nothing, or I can't help you, and then just turn into a bat.
Yeah,
Those are fun.
Yeah.
Especially if you're walking to the healing houses with, like, you know, the alarm beeping, and then that bat hits you and you just fucking die. That's always fun. You just learn to not talk to the people wearing purple, basically. It's like, it's not that hard. Just malicious shit. Another fun note about the Famicom Disk System release of this game is there's a sort of, I guess, infamous bug in the Western release of this game that was really made famous by AVGN, but it was probably known before then. This game has basically a 2 final boss kind of thing. You fight a big bird, you know, that famous Zelda trope of fighting a big weird bird with a spell that you might not have gotten. You beat that, and then your shadow self comes out, and you gotta fight that, and it's actually, like, thematically really cool and whatever the hell. In the Western release of this game, the pro strat is go to the left corner, duck, and then just keep stabbing.
Stab him at his knees, yeah.
You'll get him. That doesn't work in the Japanese version. He'll fucking get on top of you and just kill you if you do that. So not only is it harder, it's also harder.
That's great. Great.
All right, so we've kind of been dancing around this. Something that I've been thinking about is I think this game has too much enemy variety. And by that I mean it's like, oh, hey, it's those same boomerang throwing wolf people, except now the blue ones have a completely different rhythm to them. And this is something that I've been thinking about, but in a lot of ways, while yes, I agree that Zelda 2 is an RPG, in even more ways, this is kind of like a rhythm game where you can actually beat almost everything in this game without taking damage if you can remember the rhythm and the patterns and you just time things well.
Yeah.
It is made incredibly difficult to do that because, oh, the orange version of this enemy is in this dungeon, in this dungeon, in this dungeon, but also there's a blue version and then a red version, and each of these versions have different sub-animations that have a completely different pattern or a completely different rhythm. So it's almost impossible to kind of use the patterns and the cues with pixel perfect accuracy, which is what the game sometimes expects at any point. Like, it's when you have those night people, right?
Yeah.
And the red ones are different than the blue ones, which are different from the orange ones. And the way you go about defeating all three of these is slightly different or different enough to where you can employ the same strategy over and over again.
Yeah, the orange ones are slightly dumber than the red ones, and the blue ones are slightly smarter than the red ones, and they also throw knives while they're fighting you. But I think you're spot on. I think the combat is a little more... yeah, I'll get in trouble. Dare I say there's a little souls in here, my friends?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely some souls in here.
But, Castlevania enemies, you have a whip with, a fairly significant range, and a lot of them, it's just hit them 2 times with the whip and they die. These, you have to, you can kind of cheese a lot of them and learn patterns.
Weave.
But when you're getting up on those iron knuckles and before you've kind of, learned the pro strat or whatever, you're kind of just sparring with them. And it's kind of awesome because they're uncannily smart. They're kind of watching, there's a lot of positional shit going on. Your shield raises and lowers if you're pressing down on the D-pad, and then you've got, overhead strikes, downward thrusts, and, you can stab at the knees, you can stab at their head. So, everything that you're doing, those iron knuckles are kind of, adjusting to it, and they'll flicker their shield up and down, so you have to sort of, guess their movements. They feel uncannily smart, even if they are, as I said, they're not that complicated, and it turns out a way that you can beat all of them is jump and stab them in the head. Not the downward thrust, just jump and stab them in the head. They have no defense for that. It's like the dive kick of Zelda, basically.
For being an iconic Link move, especially in Smash Bros. Downward stab kind of fucking sucks.
Yeah, there's a lot of enemies, specifically the iron knuckles and anything with a helmet. That helmet just means, don't bother, because you will just bounce off their head. It does nothing. But most things that are not wearing helmets are squishy, and that move is okay. It's just the times that you would really appreciate it, the game's like, nah, dude, you got to actually fight these. You're gonna have to figure this one out. And
tough. I will say that something that I appreciate about this game is how it's okay with you just saying, no, I don't want to do this. I just want to jump over you and just move on with my life. The game's totally fine with that.
Yeah.
You're going to get punished for the experience.
Well, but again, usually the times you would be jumping over stuff is in dungeons where, I could fight all these scrubs for 30 experience a pop, but I'm about to get thousands of experience if I just beat this boss. So...
Speaking of which, there's a decent variety to the magic system here. Each of the abilities has a different utility. I think the only part of the magic system that I really don't like are the last 2, which are very situational for one you use for exactly one screen to unlock a thing, a skeleton key, and then the other is really only useful for the final boss, which you've already mentioned is some bullshit, but... I was always using shield. The heal spell should have been cheaper, but it's useful. The jump ability was really nice, and that fairy ability, very nice.
Yeah, that fairy is...
There are ideas.
The problem with this magic system is when you come up against certain barriers or cliffs or parts of the environment that can only be scaled if you have enough magic, and you've reached this point of the dungeon where it's like, shit, I don't have enough magic. What the fuck? I can't get over this cliff because I can't jump or turn into a fairy. I guess I just gotta come in and out and then wait for one of them to drop a magic potion. Or I could just kill myself and respawn and try again.
Yeah, it becomes... Or, if you're playing it in the 21st century, okay, save state back. Let's see if I can get through here and save enough MP.
And again, I'm going to bring this up, but without a save state, I cannot imagine playing this game as it was originally released with doing this the old-fashioned way, banging my head on these systems. I think that version.
The only
of the
people who would make that defense are either lunatic speedrunners or 45-year-old men.
Yeah.
And here's the only reason why, because I was thinking about, I was like Jeff. It's it's kind of parry system and timing system, and it's kind of cool when you're doing this. There's a better version of that, Jeff, and it's called Kung Fu by Irem.
What if we just played Rygar?
Or Rygar.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying about the Kung Fu, but it's different.
Yeah, but it's better, it's faster paced, and it's more rewarding, and there's a character system there that's actually fun.
I will say I do like Kung Fu, I think, more than this game. Shame on me, but man, now I'm just thinking about Kung Fu. That game kicks ass.
How about YR Kung Fu? Can we play YR Kung Fu?
No, it's a shit-ass fighter. It's terrible.
YR Kung Fu isn't good.
Yeah, that's just PP.
Also known as Spartan X in Japan.
That one's not Spartan X. That's just Kung Fu.
No. Kung Fu Master, right? We're talking about the same game.
Yeah, ER Kung Fu is a Konami fighter.
Didn't Shigeru Miyamoto make the NES version of Kung Fu?
He did. There's a whole tortured history of why that game got made the way it did that Jeremy Parrish actually dug up like a month and a half ago, I think. Basically, it comes down to fun contract stuff between Nintendo and IREM in 1985. And the fun thing that fell out of that is IREM basically were the only Famicom manufacturers that were allowed to put a light on their cartridge for a very long time. So their Famicom cartridges, at least for the first couple of years, have this red LED on them that generally still works. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because the Famicom didn't have a power light on it. So they thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could just have a power light? But it was just baked into our game. Yeah, so go get yourself a copy of 10 Yard Fight.
I mean,
or Zippy Race, or I guess Spartan X even. And yeah, that has this cool light. Scoon. There's the other one. Scoon's
this sounds a lot better than other contractual Nintendo games involving the word Zelda.
Yeah.
Here's the fucking thing.
Okay.
I played.
Can you talk about your experiences with those games, Brady?
Yeah, the other platform Zelda games.
Fans of Zelda games were blessed last year. I believe it was last year with some fucking lunatic remade Wand of Gamelon and Faces of Evil in, I think, Unity or something. But straight up trying to do a 1-to-1, but what if the hitboxes worked? What if you didn't die in 2 seconds and had invincibility period? What if the game ran at a better frame rate? And I will say this, Wand of Gamelon Remastered, which you can find on illegal Canadian archive, The Land of Lawlessness. I have enjoyed my time with it more than Zelda 2.
Damn.
The Philips CDI version of that game I have not played. But this is just a PSA for all you out there that it's not just AM2R in the pantheon of cool Nintendo fan games that get DMCA'd and then you have to go to weird places to find them.
Someone needs to make a really souped up version of Super Mario Special for whatever, the PC-88 or whatever.
I think someone has.
Oh, kick ass. I bet
at least in Mario Maker.
Yeah, so,
they've remade those levels in Mario Maker.
I should get Mario Maker too. I really should. Have we flogged this sufficiently?
No. Yes. When did this game? I want to ask all of us. When did this game break for all of us?
Death Mountain.
What was What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
We haven't talked enough about the Death Mountain problem. I guess okay.
Let's talk about Death Mountain because I think I'm willing to concede to you that the first 2 dungeons, other than the fact that those swamp tiles cause you to move to a crawl, so getting to that second dungeon sucks ass. The start of this game is understandable because it's they made an NES hard game. And then you get to Death Mountain.
Yeah. So it is one of the most buck wild vertical difficulty walls ever. And it's kind of a combination of several things. It's basically a combination of suddenly everything is notably harder. It's new varieties of enemies that you've already encountered. New enemies you've not encountered yet. You're fairly low level still. And on top of that, it's a teleport maze. It's a series of tubes.
And on top
as our
of that,
favorite
Jeff,
senator
because
said.
This is not officially a temple, reaching the end of this doesn't give you a level up that resets your health and your magic. So if you get to the end and you get the hammer, you might as well just let the enemies kill you so as that you respawn by North Castle and you can just go... You're able to go to the next palace even easier.
Yeah. By the way, there's a quick save feature in this game that a lot of the dorks that play this use. On the second controller, I think it's up B, just quick saves, and you'll just respawn at that North Castle like immediately.
That's right.
So yeah, that is exactly what the dork I was watching specifically would do. Every time he got an item in a dungeon or this hammer, immediately slap that. It's like, all right, this sucked. Let's get out of here, like right now. But yeah, it's a maze of caves. Each one of them you come out and you come to a node with like 3 more caves you go into, and each one of those leads to like one of there's like 18 or 19 specific like entry points in this network, and only one of them is like basically a valid path through.
Yeah.
And
it's like the Lost Woods.
Everything in there sucks. Everything in there sucks.
And Jeff, each cave is like 3 parts long.
Yes.
So you're actually playing like the equivalent of 2.5 dungeons or temples because of how long these caves are. Each cave that it is. And yeah, if you're not on the critical path, you either might loop back to where you started, or you might just take an even longer route to get there.
It's crazy.
Unconscionable.
Yeah.
Like, when I first looked at this map, I thought Maze Island was going to be the hardest, but you can actually, like, serpentine your way to where you only have, like, one random encounter, and if you have the water boots, you can even cross over and immediately get to the palace there.
Yeah.
This might be... I think this is a shoo-in for worst dungeon, our worst dungeon category.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Unless Xenosaga 2's got something really rancid up its asshole, which I would not put it past those developers to have, like, some real rotten eggs just straight up in that taint. But this is the shoo-in for worst dungeon of the year. And we said that about Eternal Sonata, but, like, boy.
Yeah.
I would rather play Eternal Sonata than most.
I know, and it made me think about, like, oh, man, all of these games that I complained about prior to this game. No, this was the game that was worthy of complaining about.
Like, I think this game, yeah, if you go in with the cheats, I think it is a tolerable NES action platformer. But, you know, if you're going to play a fucking hard-as-nails NES action platformer, maybe play Castlevania.
Play Castlevania. Play Kung Fu.
Play Ninja Gaiden.
Play the original Zelda. Play Mario, goddammit.
Yeah.
Play fucking Zelda 1.
I
Zelda
would even
1.
play, I know this is weird, Ninja Gaiden.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ninja Gaiden is balls hard, but I feel like there's a speed, a snappiness.
There's some bullshit in Ninja Gaiden, but also that game is not as long as this game.
I mean, there's even more like exploratory, like, you know, Conquest of the Crystal Palace. You get your like your Faxanadus, your Legacy of the Wizard, Battle of Olympus. Like there's other games that are kind of like this, but are toned down significantly. But playing in like the same space.
Like Final Fantasy, man.
As long as we don't have to talk about Hide Glide.
I would rather play Final Fantasy II. And I ain't ashamed to say that.
That's big talk, my friend.
Crystallis. I don't like Crystallis.
Yeah. It kind of more in a Zelda 1 mode, but yes, Crystallis is pretty dang good. Let me tell you, it's a good SNK game. I think we've pretty well got this up.
Yeah. I want to go back to the original point I was going to be like, when did this game really, it's like, man, fuck this, I'm done. Like, for me, it was that second to last dungeon right after Dangerous Hyrule. The one right before the final dungeon, I just, like, for whatever reason, it's like I died and I realized I have to walk all the way back to do the second half of these dungeons. This sucks. I don't want to do this. Like, I just gotten the Thunder spell. And it's like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, this is a cool spell that really doesn't do anything. You get that spell, and all it does is get you a skeleton key, which is cool. But I don't know. So, Braden, when did you say, nah, no thank you?
I mean, I was on vacation this last weekend and had to do more child juggling than I was expecting with my nieces and nephews. So, in theory, I could still go. But honestly, Death Mountain was one of those things where it's like, what if I just stopped? What if I played a good video game?
Wait. Did I get the furthest in this game again? For the podcast?
Yeah,
I'm not that far behind.
I don't understand why you care so much about your tolerance for self-hatred.
I am at the Maze Palace right now, and I just keep getting knocked into pits, and it just driving me fucking nuts.
Dog, there's another palace after that one. Here's the funny thing: the Sea Palace is actually super easy.
Yeah. That like the boss. I know the boss of this Maze Palace place, is a cakewalk because it's just use reflect
Yeah, you
on
just
it.
use the reflect spell and you just bounce shit against him. It's actually kind of funny. That's the other thing. Like, the bosses aren't actually that hard once you figure things out. Like, there's the boss where you just bounce spells against him. The one after him, all you need to do is jump and hit him in the head. That's all you need to do. There's the guy that has the chariot, and you just... The funny thing about the one with the chariot is that it's like, oh, wait, they totally stole this boss design for Shovel Knight. This is funny.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Gino for teaching me about how to fight RPG bosses. In that one specifically, because when I got stuck at the end of Final Fantasy VIII, he was like, just strength. Stack everything into strength. You need to just hit harder. That chariot, you beat that horse, and then it's just a blue iron knuckle, the like really fucked up ones that throw knives at you while they're stabbing you. And it's like, oh right, remove his range. I just need to stay on him and just hit him. Just hit him and hit him and hit him and hit him and hit him.
Oh, and how could I forget? Like, this also has the Castlevania Simon's Quest design of there's invisible walls that you need to walk through, and like there's items and parts of the world where you just need to walk through the wall or jump through the roof, or you need to find this pixel here that has like a trap door that, oh man, that the one cutscene that plays when you go through a trap door is so funny to me.
I like that one of the heart containers is just out in the middle of the ocean, and you just have to basically hunt and peck your way onto an invisible path across the water.
Yeah.
Because you can walk on water, but only specific water, I guess. Very, very silly.
It's a weird decision. Oh, remember when you had to pick up the kid on Maze Island, and he's like in a completely the opposite direction as the palace, and then you have to walk all the way back to that town? So is that you can get the spell?
Out.
One of the great animations in Famicom history, though, when you hold that child over your head. It's very funny.
My favorite thing is when you pick up an extra life and it's just Link holding a miniature Link.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that, but a child.
Yeah, that's just one of those things where it's like, oh, they did the Mario thing where there's extra lives, but the extra lives don't like in an RPG. It would be like, oh, so my total bank goes from 3 lives to 4 lives permanently. Nope.
Yeah.
It's just a 1-up for this playthrough,
and they don't respawn,
which is completely useless.
It's a pretty gnarly game. Though, seeing as it was an RPG that we played, it's time to put it on this list.
Right.
Be done. Because I think we've sufficiently explained it. It's a game that, as Braden said, I think it's very telling Nintendo just put out a version of this that just got rid of the RPG mechanics in it entirely. And we're like, hey, enjoy this.
I do want to thank Jatsu in chat. He's actually been sharing how he actually played this when he was a child. And he just wrote a couple of comments that I think I want to read.
Sure.
I want to admit that, so this is Jatsu from our Discord, which you can say if you're in our Discord. I actually forgot to get the candle the first time I played this when I was a kid, and I had to go back. That sucked. Kids had a lot of more free time back in the day, and as an adult where your team time is limited, it's not so great.
Yeah. RPGs.
I guess I should note, before we put this on here, that this was nominated to us by a listener.
Yeah.
Why did I take this off this list already?
Oh, I know who did.
Can you give?
I know who did because I'm the one who goaded him to recommend it.
Can you give me that name because I took it off this list?
Yeah, thanks to Functionality.
Thank you.
My sicko friend who I play Hunt Showdown with.
Functionality. You have inflicted Zelda II upon us.
Oh yeah, he's gonna laugh. He's gonna be like, "Aha, you're in pain." This
one is gonna be fun. So if you're playing the home game, you can pull up bit.ly/OTDE rank. That's bit.ly/OTDE rank. And see the list. I'm not going to read it. At this point, I will just say do
what you said last time. Top 5, bottom 5.
I'm going to even make it simpler than that. I got top 3, bottom 3. So at the bottom, 21st place is Draken. 22nd place, Secret of the Stars, and the bottom of our list in 23rd is Aiden Chronicles the First Mage, three not great experiences. And at the top of the list, the top three in ascending order. In third place, we have Xenosaga Episode 1, Der Will Zermacht. Second place, we have Suikoden. And the top of our list, New World Computing presents Might and Magic 6, The Mandate of Heaven, for the personal computer. Worth noting, Arbitrary Water nominated the top two of those. And seeing as the third one, I just wrote the whole staff nominated it. Basically, Braden, you've kind of given us the entire top of this list. All mine are kind of in the middle.
I have good taste.
Hey, I'm in top 5 at least.
Yeah, I should nominate a good game someday. Anyway, Zelda 2, I think it's fair to start in the middle. As it happens, that puts us at basically a Jeff game. How do we feel this compares to Hybrid Heaven?
It's worse.
I just wanted to hear you say that, ZP.
I just love that Hybrid Heaven is the median point.
He picked this on purpose so is that I would say I think Hybrid Heaven is better than
I think
Zelda
Hybrid
2.
Heaven is a better game than Zelda 2.
Specifically a better RPG, which is very funny to think about, and maybe not strictly correct, but whatever. Okay, so let's, big steps. How do we feel sort of like Lord of the Rings Third Age, Quest 64 area?
I think the battle is this better or worse than Ys 3? That's my shot. Maybe you guys can just mull over it. I think this is a fight between Ys 3 and Zelda 2. Very similar.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. A lot of the same problems.
The first boss fight in Ys 3 is way more fucked than the first boss fight in Zelda 2.
Yes, but it's the totality of the experience. Yes. If we actually stuck with it, I feel like I'm gonna say this. I've replayed Ys 3, and I'm gonna side ever so slightly with Jeff. If we had just stuck with it, I think we could have actually finished Ys 3.
Sure.
I think Ys 3 is
I think Ys 3 has a banger soundtrack, and
I think it was inappropriate to nominate it in a Kusoge episode. It was an
don't worry. I have given you both more material.
All right.
Yeah, Ys 3, the soundtrack alone wins it out. Like that, it's just very unremarkable music in this game, and it's got a lot of other problems. Better than the third
original
Age.
Legend of Zelda has some banger iconic tunes. Zelda 2 has the Grand Palace theme.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about the Third Age?
I think legacy alone means that it is a game of consequence. Obviously, it's a game of consequence, and The Lord of the Rings is a game that will be forgotten. And
by people who are not us.
Barethor will be thrown in the trash, where he will exist forever.
We gave Barethor his due.
Zelda 2 will be released on every Nintendo console that will ever come out in the future.
Yeah, they continue to make money. It's crazy they've continued to make money on.
Also, Zelda 2's ambitious. I know I spent most of this podcast complaining about it. It's a game that, at the time, it's kind of amazing looking at how big its world is. The scale of the game is like, for an NES game in particular, the sense of scale is just really impressive. But yeah, I think it's better than Third Age, but not better than Ys 3.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I will accept that.
All right, well, then that's where it's going to go. It will be the new number 16 on this list, as we've said, right between Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys, the original version, not the remake, that is very, 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 very good, by the way. Between Ys 3 and Lord of the Rings The Third Age, I listed this as the Xbox version because I thought that was funny. So, congratulations, Nintendo, EAD. Hey, congrats to Shigeru Miyamoto. You basically made one RPG in your entire career, and it's somehow worse than Hybrid Heaven. So, congrats.
Congratulations.
And an annual entry in a sports franchise.
Omedetou gozaimasu.
Oh, that was beautiful. I'm very proud of what we've done.
Yes.
Well, now we get to talk about why we're all depressed, right?
Now we get to talk about what we're going to do.
Yeah, so I was going to do like a segment. I was going to record a little funny thing, but I don't... for those listening to the release version of this, the internet cut out. It's been a long day. I ain't got time.
My car was stranded in the middle of rural Oregon.
Let me tell you.
It's been a long day.
Not a place you want to be stuck very long, because there's not a lot out there. I'm glad you were at a place that had cell service, because otherwise they would have just found desiccated bodies in a Toyota.
All right, let's talk about the next dark deed that we need to complete.
We got 20 subs, and we're going to play Unlimited Saga.
We have our patron goal.
God,
we're going to play
damn it.
Unlimited Saga, a game that, weirdly enough, has not been affected
good news,
by the
Jeff.
retro
I finally got this
collector
thing to
bubble.
cooperate with PCSX2,
Okay.
but
I did not. Copy.
I did not get it to cooperate with my constitution, and I felt like I wanted to throw up for the 2 hours that I played it.
I think that game is fascinating, and I'm very excited to talk about it because it's a game that was not made for humans.
I can already predict the thing that I'm going to have a hard time with is, everything's random.
Yeah, like nothing you do. I wrote a pretty detailed. It's the most detailed review I've ever written
One of
on
the
Giant
best
Bomb.
user reviews I've ever read on Giant Bomb, but other than maybe Ryan Davis's Rayman 2 review.
Nothing you do in that game matters at all.
What wilds me out...
I loved AD&D, and now I'm going to make the most sterile, bizarro,
Jeff, just
ersatz version of that.
Answer this to me. Those weirdly beautiful, like, cel-shaded cutscenes that play for exactly, 2 minutes, is that the only time you see that art style? Like, they spent their money for, a 2-minute cutscene at the very start of the game? Is there, a middle version of that cutscene?
It's been a while. I want to say there's more
guarantee
cutscenes than that, but, it's mostly that fucking board game.
Board game
thing.
where slot machine shit, right?
That's most of the game, man.
This is why you two, I think you've both said you want to play King of Dragon Pass, but I'm starting to feel self-conscious about, I don't know if we can actually make a podcast about King of Dragon Pass, but I think there's lore there and writing and the developer's interesting.
I mean, you have given that game its due.
I don't know how I can talk about Unlimited Saga for more than 10 minutes. I can talk about
Unlimited Saga.
10 minutes is where it's everything is random and nothing means anything.
No, it is a fascinating example of anti-player game design.
Sure.
I don't think they're going to listen to this show, but I've got people I know through Hardcore Gaming 101 who genuinely, honest to God, really, really, really like Unlimited Saga, and I really respect this person specifically in their opinion.
Kawazu-san, thank you for your contributions to Hardcore Gaming 101.
I wouldn't put it past them. I don't get the sense this individual is in fact Kawazu-san, but I just it brought me no pleasure to play that game, such that it spurred me to write the longest review thing I've probably ever going to write, and I'm open to trying this again, but I gotta say, I have zero faith that this is going to go well.
I have already played this game for 90 minutes on stream. Gino was there, he can attest. And it was just 90 minutes of me going, what the fuck is going on? Why is anything happening?
Apparently Akatoshi Kawazu still works in Square Enix, but...
Yeah.
He's ahead.
Saga Scarlet Grace came out 2015.
And apparently he was the executive producer for that Romancing Saga Reuniverse port.
Yeah.
I'm sure he looked at that. I have no doubt in my mind that there are Saga games that are good. I believe. Those Final Fantasy Legend games.
People like Scarlet Grace.
Romancing Saga 2 and 3 have, very good reputations. They're very open-ended. I think...
I know someone who really likes Frontier and Frontier 2.
Unlimited Saga is sort of an aberration, I think, because it's just poor.
It is the most experimental.
Yes. They went too far. He's just turning a knob back and forth that says malice, and looking back at the audience.
Turn the malice crank.
Yes. So anyway, look forward to that in a couple weeks.
That's our new slogan.
The malice crank must be cranked. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, guys, gals, non-binary pals, all of you. Thanks for turning into Off the Deep End. Hey, please send any and all questions and inquiries that you have about this episode, any upcoming episodes, etc., to inquiries@deep.lol. Also, if you'd like to help keep this show and the Deep Listens Mothership on the air, please consider kicking us a few bucks. You can go to our Patreon. That's at patreon.com/deeplistens. That's patreon.com/deeplistens. Any dollar amount is greatly appreciated. It will get you access to a Discord. It will get you the ability to put a game onto the RPG slush pile, which we will draw from again as soon as we're done with our promised expedition into Unlimited Saga. Special shout out to the artist note of SuperSex420 for providing us with Halfway, the music that you're probably hearing right now. This and other great tracks are available on the Bandcamp for this individual. To search for SuperSex420. See you next time, and remember, there's no such thing as cheating in a single-player game, specifically if Nintendo just releases a version where it's just, here's the cheats, have fun. It's crazy, but good they did that. Bye!
Bye.
This episode of Off the Deep End was recorded and edited on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Nisqually or Nisqually people, who have lived on and stewarded these lands and waters since times immemorial.